Muito boa tarde, eu sou Ari Plonsky, começo falando em português e daqui a pouco nós nos movimentamos para o idioma que é conhecido como Globish, que é o inglês global, ou seja, um certo sabor de inglês com sotaques diferentes e, enfim, sabores próprios. Alguém tem dificuldade de entender inglês? Please raise a hand. Levanta a mão. Não. Okay, so thank you. We are moving now to English or Globish. It's a pleasure to have this session around the so special exhibit, Grace at the Boundary of Knowledge, prepared with a lot of competence and dedication and love by Sandra Boeschenstein. Thank you for coming here and for sharing your art. We have here I'll make a brief introduction. We have here on my, Sandra is here on my left side. On my right side, we have Dr. Britta Padberg. Dr. Britta Padberg was for many years the managing director of the CIF, the Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of Bielefeld in Germany, where I had the opportunity to meet Sandra in an exhibit that was presented on the 50th anniversary of CIF. CIF was the first Institute for Advanced Studies connected to universities. The institute's history is longer, it's from 1930, but for some time the institutes were isolated institutions, but this movement of institutes connected to universities began in Germany in Bielefeld 1968. So in 2018, I had the opportunity through this beautiful event organized in CIF to know this concept of artist in residence and to know Sandra. On my right, extreme right, but not political, we have we have Professor Regina Marcus. Professor Regina Marcus, a dear friend, is a full professor of the Institute of Biosciences at the University of São Paulo. Had during all her career a very active presence as a public scientist, not only a scientist in the lab or in the class, but also in the public space for many years in the Brazilian Society for the Advancement of Science. And we are very happy that I think a month ago or something like that, you received the UN World recognition for, it's called, I think, Women Rise and Raise, correct? Okay, so it's a very, we are very pleased to have you here with us. Now, on my left side, and also nothing political, we have Professor Maurício Pietrocola. Professor Maurício Pietrocola is by training a physicist, but he is the faculty of the School of Education and also very active in the Institute for Advanced Studies and the chairs that we have in education. I forgot to tell that Professor Regina Marcus was a member of our directory overseeing board for several years and also was instrumental in promoting international cooperation for the Institute and among all the world institutes. And finally, at the end, we have Professor Claudio Mubarak. Claudio Mubarak, who is a professor at the School of Communications and Arts of University of São Paulo, was an artist. And so we have here, as the title of our session suggests, we have here a blend of the artist, one other artist, a scientist, a manager of this process of interaction, and an educator. And so we hope to have an interesting afternoon. Professor Martin Grossman, thank you very much. Martin decided to sit there, but he is really the soul behind this orchestra that you see here and doing all the connections. Thank you also very much for Centro Maria Antônia from University of São Paulo for hosting us. For the team of Centro Universitário Maria Antônia and of the Institute for Advanced Studies who is taping the event. we'll do the following. We'll begin, if I understand, with some presentation by Sandra Boeschenstein. Then we'll move to Britta Padberg, who will give the context of how things happen. And then we move to Regina Marcus, who will look from the perspective of science, of German Wissenschaft. We have at the end Claudio Mubarak, who will present also his thoughts and experience from the perspective of an artist. And Mauricio will share with me the coordination of this panel, but basically he'll also talk. So you talk as much as you want, whenever you want. This gives us the right. May I just briefly mention that two things. Number one, that I got in contact with this involvement of arts and science in a different way in a directors meeting of this international network of institutes for advanced studies in 1916, if I remember, in Birmingham. When we were presented with two cases, I'll briefly mention one case, which is an initiative of the university called Physics Meets Science, Physics Meets Arts. And we had a very interesting presentation by an astrophysics. Astrophysics is a person who tries to look very far away and see and hear the waves you cannot see so far, but you capture the waves, and from the graphs of the waves you try to understand better the universe, the limits, the history of the universe, expansion, etc., etc. And an artist from the audiovisual area of the University of Birmingham. And what was very interesting is that if I had before that the concept of science for arts, for instance, or science and technology for arts, all the idea of arts, techno arts, and etc., that was present during my youth times. I remember when it appeared. I had also the idea of science in arts, so it's artistic representation of a scientific experiment or something like that, how a cell is and whatever. Beautiful art from pictures, let's say, taken by a microscope. But I was never aware of this fact that I learned then, that art can also help science. Basically, to make a long story short, this astrophysics, they capture gravitational waves and made graphs from that. But from the gravitational waves, from this capture through some device, it can be transformed in sound with the help of the artist. And by hearing the compositions that the artist made, it gave different insights to the group of astrophysics. So arts for science I had never seen before. So that was my first encounter. The second encounter was 2 years later. It was really 2015, 2018, then 3 years later in Bielefeld. And then I saw a different approach, which was Sandra's approach. It's her capability, as you see here, of transposing art in the context of the advancement of knowledge, and then we have the pleasure to have you here. And the second comment is again to thank you for sharing with us your sensibility. Sandra, please. And you are now.
Thank you so much, Ari, and thank you all that you're here. I'm happy to share some experiences and ideas with you. So I thought it would be a good a step to start this and to open this to focus on the title. The title of this event is as well Grace at the Boundary of Knowledge. And I will do that with 5 questions. So the first is why that title, where does it come from? The second question is why boundaries of knowledge and not the ideal center? So the next question is why grace and not beauty? Then followed by the question, what about knowledge from the perspective as an artist? And the last one is what kind of behavior and mindset is useful at the boundary of knowledge? So I start with the first question, why this title, where does it come from? So this started with the invitation by Britta Partberg. It was for me for the first time that I was as an artist among scientists. And I thought I have to react on this very special situation because I'm used to stay among artists as an artist. So I thought I should find a title as a guiding line for myself and as well as to position myself, to give somehow a portrait of myself to the scientists. And the third aspect is as well that I think it's probably a zone where artists and scientists are the closest together, the boundary of knowledge. So this was the reason why I thought I should construct or compose a title which includes all that. The title could have been The Beauty of Knowledge, but as an artist I like to involve several twists, so I did that twist from beauty to knowledge, and I did the second twist from knowledge to boundary of knowledge. And this brings me to the question then, why boundaries of knowledge and why not the ideal center? I would say that the boundary of knowledge is the most intimate zone of research. So it's there where we are losing somehow the frame. There are no standards, there is no routine, no rhetoric, and we are somehow naked. Therefore, as well, probably closer together than in the center of each other, of each research field. So then it is as well, I think, the place where the voice of the phenomena itself rises. So we are not only close together, a searcher of every field, but as well the phenomena is there and contributes in a strong way to the communication. So I would say it's the movement from research to search, which is a more modest, more basic movement, and in the best case, then back to research, but with slightly shifted parameters. And a last remark on boundaries or peripheries, I'm so much attracted by them, is I would say that the boundary or the periphery is somehow the best indirect portrait, but probably the portrait which has the deepest truth of the center, because it's all the abandoned qualities, all the tension, what cannot be used in the center is there condensed in the periphery, and it's a very telling zone which tells us a lot about the center in the best way. So this was the decision for the boundary of knowledge. Now, short to my third question is why grace and not beauty? I think grace is so much attached to a physical behavior. You have beauty that can be very abstract, but I think this is the embodied beauty, the beauty of behavior, the beauty of movement, and therefore I thought I should reactivate that word that as well in German is not so much used, die Grazie. It's, this was another aspect why I liked to activate that word. So I would say coming closer to the boundary, the presence and importance of the body raises up. The body, the matter you're dealing with, and as well the situation, as I mentioned before, they all have a voice that you can hear probably in a better way than in the center of the research. And I would say the physiological epistemic forces that are humor, doubt, or as well the quality of being amazed, which is somehow the very first step into philosophy, is there, and they are all rooted. You can all feel them in your body, so I would call them the most physiological epistemic forces. So therefore I put that stress or highlighted the body, and this is tied to grace and this special quality of beauty. So I come to the next question. So what about knowledge from the perspective of an artist? You may know that as an artist, knowledge production is not my goal, but I would say or I can talk about myself, my aim is to reach epistemic qualities through actions and through situations. And I'm led by three questions. What can be said, what can be shown, and what can only show itself when we prepare a stage for it? So I would say my artistic practice is led by those questions, or with other terms, what does a search for knowledge look like that abandons the functional and coherent bringing together of different levels in order to work with the turbulences between the media and categories? So what special qualities can emerge only on an indirect path? And here I talk about two things that are very important for arts. It's one, the entanglement of media and message. This is a basic quality in my opinion for arts, that they are inseparable, you cannot separate them. And the other one is, I think that artistic research can have an overlapping zone between epistemic and poetic qualities. So this is in other terms what I meant with what special qualities can emerge only on an indirect path. We could call that the poetic quality. That brings me to my last question. So what kind of behavior and mindset could be useful at the boundary of knowledge? I would say the well-educated cultural technique of concentration solely does not serve there. And as I'm always amazed that in education we so much focus on concentration, and we do never develop from the first step of education the complementary topography. This would be situation awareness. And I would say a most interesting movement in research for me as an artist is a pendulum movement between those. So the interplay of clear decisions and then the readiness for surprise. And I very much like that. I think we are close together, artists and scientists. Louis Pasteur, the French chemist, his quote from 1854 is, "La chance ne sourit qu'aux esprits bien préparés." So would say luck only favors the well prepared. And I really much like that. I would say if I would find my words for that are very similar. To find a good balance between clear decisions and a well-prepared articulation zone for invited qualities on one hand and for unknown and unpredictable qualities on the other hand. So I will close my statement with by reading the 6 lines that are the introduction of the book Grace at the Boundary of Knowledge, followed by the 36 drawings, so it's a very short text. Bringing light into darkness is simpler than darkness into light. The boundary of knowledge forms the hierarchy-free play of the two processes. This is work with both the constructing and the decaying energies of meaning, and it is the motions at the edges of the conceivable, without prioritizing either side of the boundary. Loose contact between language and matter. When is something and how does it accrue meaning? How do the situation, the image and language touch each other? And what is the appearance of a knowledge beckoning between material, picture and language and cannot be further extracted? Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I think I will pass to Britta to make your comments and impressions.
Thank you also Ari for the nice introduction and Martin for preparation this wonderful exhibition. We planned that 3 years or 2 years ago at least, so this exhibition should have happened 2 years ago already, but I learned by Ari we have to cut out the 2 years of our life. So, but anyway, I was really so happy that even the person changed at the museum, at the institute, it could make happen to bring this, I think, amazing exhibition here to Brazil. Part of it was shown at the CIF, my former institute, already at the occasion of our anniversary, and that was when Ari saw this exhibition, and we both agreed that it would be a great instrument also to foster exchange between different spheres of the world. Yeah. So I'm very happy. I have only short remarks, but I think it's good to continue with some thoughts about the connection between art and science. In the current of the differentiation process of modernity, it made that art and science drifted apart in its task, its form of expression and the quality of criteria. Truth is not beauty anymore, beauty not truth, so what is truth? True must not be beauty, and the vice versa, and what comes to it is that also the art develops a special sense for beauty, and if beauty is really the driving force for artistic process, and the same is true for research. So truth is a term which is questioned nowadays. So those both became two separated spheres. For some time now, despite of this differentiation, we have experiencing a renaissance of bringing art and science closer together again. There are many reasons for this, among them the discussion about different forms of knowledge, generation, and which questions the monopoly position of scientific knowledge. Participatory research, science, citizen science, global production of knowledge are further keywords in the movement to open up and democratize science in a way. The risk associated with this has been addressed many times. Does art submit to the rationality of science if it becomes too close? Will science lose its quality standards in postmodern way of thinking? Will funding in the future be dedicated on the basis of criteria that are not related to art but more to science? We observe that art and science are very often associated with an aestheticization of scientific practice. So Ari mentioned something of this. You could ask, does it really bring you new knowledge to sonificate scientific data? Yeah? But of course it's great to look, and we all know that often it brings a kind of, it feeds a general fascination with research, or at best could serve as an aesthetic didactic of research. But does it really bring new knowledge? And we also could observe that art is often focused on lab research, so not so much on the humanities and different forms of research. In a way, the poor illustration is intellectual, not very satisfying. And for art, at any rate, this surfing role should not be enough. The title of Sandra Boeschenstein's exhibition, Grace at the Boundary of Knowledge, is based on the deeper common ground between artistic and scientific research. The notion of complexity and incompleteness of knowledge, those both terms I think are very crucial, play a central role. Both art and science seek access to the complexity of the world and our existence to it, in it. And they seek a way of dealing with this complexity. Epistemic starting point for both scientific and artistic research is the knowledge about the incompleteness of our understanding of the world. Science is characterized by epistemic openness and wants to overtake itself again and again. Central to scientific research is the relationship to the scientific communities, their epistemic networks. Every scientific starting point ties in with the current state of research and wants to expand it. Particularly, successful research approaches even lead to paradigmatic breaks, but still remain connected to the scientific tradition. I stand on the shoulders of giants, say researchers, to place their work in a historical context. Art, as an epistemic practice, takes a different approach. It's not bound to the state of research. The driving force of it is subjective and individual search for correlation, complementaries, and breaks in the comprehensive of the world. It lives from stubbornness as a resource. It lives from stubbornness as a resource for artistic research. I think this is really very important, that the individual stubbornness is the starting point for artists to begin with their work. It can always start anew, seeks the breaks, not the connections, and question the usual. The usual of science, these are well-furnished apartments of knowledge. Another difference characterizes art as an epistemic practice. Artistic research that does not find its conclusion in the art objects. It relies on thinking and the researching process, also on the side of reception. So not only the production of artistic research is important, but also the reception of this, and it's part of the research process. The work of Sandra Boeschenstein is a particularly good example of how art is inspired by science and does take its starting point there, while at the same time pursuing its own idiosyncratic path of research with the means of drawing and poetics. Sandra is particularly interested in the precondition of knowledge generation. How does meaning come into being? And could it not be otherwise? What are epistemic objects? What is the essence of things and terms? The space in between the tangible and the not yet tangible has taken her fancy. Here she senses the highest energy to think and rethink something new. Epistemic objects, which is in science already represented in abstraction, are objectified in her work. In this way, objects are not just objects, but they become things that always carry with them the relationship to us and their environment. That is, that they are epistemic, they have an epistemic content already. She designs landscapes and cosmic scenarios whose surfaces and structures are explored by means of drawing. Connections are decoupled in order to tie up their loose ends anew. Sandra designs epistemic topographies that we can walk with our eyes, entire landscapes and cosmologies that reach out to us and remain strangely aligned. Bruce Nauman once said, art should be effective as a possibility, not as a systematic proof of thinking. And I think this is exactly what Sandra is doing. Let me end my remark with a short remarks on where to bring artists and scientists together. I think there are not many places where you could do that. Museums, of course, create and open up forums for discussions like this, but museums are part of the artistic world. And I think there is a special role for those Institute for Advanced Study like the Instituto de Estudos Avanzados of the University of Sao Paulo, which are really very special places to invite artists and researchers to spend some time together, not to collaborate in a very tight sense, but to get to know the perspective of the others and maybe inspire new ideas, how you could see it, how you question the, maybe it's not direct inspiration, but to question the approach of the others, that you feel that this is not self-understanding to use methods or to follow theoretical thoughts. Finally, I would like to give one example. Other artists in residency who stayed for a while at our institute, they collaborated with psychologists who are interested in attention and reception, how does it come? And they work with eye trackers, and the artists say, oh, give us your eye tracker and we will do research with your method. Yeah, we will ask, what do you measure with the eye trackers? Could you also measure quality of watching? And I think this was really a brilliant example that both sides benefit a lot by this encounter. So I think it's a great chance what the Institute could deliver to the scientific community. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much, Dr. Britta. I would like to invite Professor Regina Musk to make his comments. And now we have a non-scientist speaking, and we try to see the approach and the connections.
First, I would like to thank my two good friends. First, Ari, because I know Ari since I was a child, and it was a pleasure to work with him also in the Instituto de Estudos Avançados, and say that really we are speaking Globish, and I will be the most Globish one in this people speaking. And then I would like to thank my great friend, Martin Grossman, with whom we traveled the world. No, Martin? We did a lot of things in the Instituto de Estudos Avançados, opening new avenues in the relationship, looking on science, but at that time, I know you remember, I said, no, not just science, we have to put together many, many fields to analyze time. And time is my subject, and time was the subject of this first meeting of us. And time was the subject also here. And I love it when I came to see Sandra's exposition, because time was there. In the universe, in the day-night alternation, and in all the time. I also want, when I am beginning, to say that you said, all of you said something about luck, about timing, and about knowledge. And I will put these three concepts together in just one word. That is mazal, that is sorte. And mazal is, and we say mazal tov, uma boa sorte. And what is Emi? Emi is makom, é o lugar. Lamed é zain, é z, é o tempo. E L é o conhecimento. Então, se eu colocar junto, e esse é um conceito muito antigo, de mais de 3.000, 4.000 anos. Oh, excuse me, I went back to Portuguese. You have to do it many times because I can speak several languages at the same moment, and when I change the one that I choose at the end is Portuguese. Why it will be? Oh, yeah, of course. I was born here, just in the corner, so because of this, Portuguese is the easiest language for me. So we put together time, we put together place, and we put together knowledge. And this is what Sandra's bring to me. A congregation of three important, the most important attitudes that we can have. And when we do have this, we are lucky. When we can put together at the same time all of this, we are lucky. And is this art? Yes, this is art. It's what an artist When I go to an exposition, when I buy something, when I look something, when I heard something, I am really looking for the knowledge. I am looking for the luck. I am looking for the moment. And science, how science is bringing it together. The concept in this exposition is knowledge, frontiers of knowledge, right? Frontiers of knowledge. This I will be a little bit against, or I will discuss it. And I will remember that my father used to say, joke in Spanish, when he talked about me. He always said, "Al gobierno yo soy contra." This is my oldest daughter. If there is somebody is doing an order, I am against it. And he says, this is my oldest daughter. I was never with everybody. And this is why I am against it. Because in fact, both art and science, they look forward, going above, behind, farthest than the boundaries. The boundaries doesn't exist, neither for science or art. Who puts boundaries also says that you have to go till there, and you have to follow some new route. It can be a new route to go there, but you cannot go, there is nothing after it. And indeed, the scientist looks after it, looks for something that was not known yet. So knowledge is knowledge of, when I teach science, when I teach something, then I can say that I want to transmit some knowledge. But when I do science, I want to tell my story, not just in forms of math or physics or biology, but I want to tell a new story about the universe doing any kind of science. So this is, I think, what indeed I could see in this exposition. Because when I saw lines representing day and night, light and dark, and I will say upside down, dark and light, dark, night and day. The darkness comes first, the light comes after. But if we are, and you have to remember everybody that praised the lights, oh gosh, I am not okay here. Look, these lights on us. I think that all of us would like to turn it out. And all of us know that too much light, it's not okay. And too much darkness. If I am in a dark room, if I am in a dark room, I can go on sky inside my mind. My mind will be not darkness. My mind will dream. And so, it's much difficult to be in a very bright place. It's most dangerous. But if I'm always in the complete darkness, I cannot know where to go. Oh, there are some people that know where to go. These are the people that cannot see light, the blinds. And they do know how to walk and how to deal with darkness because this is their reality. And I will come to another point that I loved in the exposition. It showed human diversity. I am really in the Bioscience Institute. I come from Escola Paulista de Medicina. I come from a biomedical basis. But now everybody, nowadays, of course, want to speak about biodiversity. Some people confuse biodiversity with conservation. Has nothing to have. Biodiversity needs to be changing. But I think that not many people speak about human diversity. Why? Because they say that one is this, you have adjectives to define people, but you don't have to have no adjectives. I want to have people in the substantive way. So humanodiversity is the word that I use in these conditions. And humanodiversity means that everyone is important, doesn't matter how. Everyone is not important, doesn't matter how. We have just to define the situations. And indeed, when I went in this exposition, the humano-diversity was there. There were everything showing to us that we have good and not so good, okay and not so okay, depending on the situation. But yes, we have one thing that was always strange in the draws that I saw, and I love draws. I think I don't know how to draw, my mother knew it, but I would love to know how to show what comes in my mind with a picture that I could draw out. And what I saw is that in some drawings where the lines, black and dark, begins to melt, so we don't have the difference between light and darkness, then those small dolls were not so happy. And this means that, yes, if we cannot have the diversity of day and night, light and dark, and if say in one situation, in one position, we lose the ability to cope with our planet. And so I will like to end saying, here we are in our planet. I will say, here I am in a planet that I have been some 60 years ago, perhaps. Yes, in this place here, in Maria Antonia, in this level here, many, many years ago. And I say, what happened after it? Many things. Good and not so good. Okay and not so okay. But we are here. And it's all the drawings, and it's all the text. And I excuse to don't have a text to speak with you with a text, but it's always like this. I try to write it, and at the end I don't write it. But at the end, we know that this will go to the future. And the future, as a current, we have a remembrance of what is happening here. So not only some years ago, but also now. So I thank you, Ari. I thank you, Marty. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for the words.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite my colleague Claudio Mubarak to make his comments and impressions about.
At first, good afternoon, everybody. I have two things to say. The first one is thank you for the invitation and to the opportunity to be here in this conversation. And the second is I need that you excuse me about my English. That is not very well, because my English is a product of many, many lectures and a lot of rock and roll too. It's not a very good recipe, I think. But there are three things that I have to say, that I want to say, about the exhibition. And the three things are related to the subject of this afternoon, the approximation between art, science, and knowledge. First of all, there is the importance of drawing. There is very easy to understand that importance, because all the things that we have in this room are design, are draft. The drawing is in all our clothes, in the building, in the machines, in the chairs, in all the things that we have around us. There is another thing that is a basic importance of the drawing. Every human being is a draftsman. Every human being design, draw, scribble all the time. Even when we don't have pencils or papers or tablets or computers, we are all the time drawing. I am sure about that. Then there is a little conclusion about this kind of idea. If all the human being is a draftsman, I think we have perhaps idea not very well, how can I say, developed about the importance of the drawing, because perhaps we put too much importance in the aspects related to the aesthetic things, the art like a category separated from science, knowledge, life, or our traveling around our life and things like that. Drawing is a strength in our life, and science is another strength in our life. And then I go to the second point. When science and art don't have these names after the Renaissance, I think there are two forms of developed things that are working together all the time. When the Renaissance created these two categories, science and art, at the same time is the beginning of the separation. This is a strange thing, but even more, I stood this moment in Italy in 15th century when they create the perspective like a science of painting. We can't understand this construction if we put out the idea that the perspective like a science used in painting, drawing, comes from the science of light that Arabs communicate to European people in the translation of Alhazen book, The Optics, that Roberto Grosseteste translated in this 13th century, I think, in Oxford. And between the 13th century and the 15th century, the Franciscan monks take this knowledge to Italy. And the science of light transformed in the science of painting. If it's not a dialogue between science and art, I don't want any more dialogues possible. I think after this moment, the separation is because we have this strange habitude to classify the things with a lot of strength, and to create categories and rules and all kinds of systems to separate things that was born together. And I'm very happy today because I think we can feel a start of a new situation in the university today. I start to work with two neuroscientists to try to understand some mechanisms of the drawing when the sight is transformed in information and is transformed in lines. I think it's a beginning of a long way, but I'm in the university many years, and it's the first time that I feel this opportunity like a thing that we can use. And the third thing that I try to explain here is about the exhibition of Sandra. That's a wonderful surprise for me because it's a very delicate work, but if you look with attention, we have a lot of informations in this works, and when we are talking about earlier, there is not an hierarchy between the very different fields of informations that you use to construct this exhibition. For instance, there is some objects that remembers toys, and the children are part of the exhibition. There is some drawings that are made direct from the body, and it's another kind of spirit that is presiding these drawings. There is a lot of plays with perspective and the distortions of the perspective, and all this kind of plays are working together to construct a poetry that is very personal in one way, and another way is offered for us to participate in this exhibition that is kind of book. That's kind of book also, and well, it's very difficult to talk about this all kind of things in English. I will stop here. If you can talk in Portuguese later, I will. Thank you. Sorry, my English.
Okay, thank you, Claudio. I'd like to make some remarks from the talks from Sandra, Britta, and the people that speak before me. I realized that Sandra has remarked that I don't remember the exact word, but she said that in fact in art she didn't make knowledge. And it's strange that we have seen a lot of convergence between art and science, but from an artist perspective, they are not doing knowledge. And maybe for my perception of scientists, that the thing that they value the most is the knowledge that they produced. This is maybe a point that we can grasp a little bit more, because at the same time in the Britta talking, she said something that there is a kind of epistemic quality of arts. And all the time, the epistemology, it's a kind of the process that in the scientific perspective and by some kind of knowledge. And I think this could be a way to try to speak a little bit more about the convergence and divergence about science. Because I think maybe there is a more restricted understanding about knowledge. And maybe you have to think about this, that this is a possibility to connect some kind of knowledge connected with art. Even so, the kind of this knowledge is not to be reproduced as we do in science. Because I think one of the quality of scientific knowledge is the way that we can reproduce this knowledge. And I think this is one of the most important value in science. For example, when you publish a paper in Brazil or any part of the world, normally if you say that this is a kind of scientific knowledge, you expected that your experiment or your research may be done in the same way for someone in another part of the world, for example, in China and Japan. This is the sense of the universality that was behind the science. And sometimes I think the scientists, the artists, seeing this process of universality in another way. And I just put this question, and I invited you, if someone wants to take this point and develop a little bit more. Sandra, maybe you?
Please, yes. So thank you for that, this question of knowledge and arts that I said my goal as an artist is not knowledge. we had a big struggle in translating the title, because my language is German, and we have that beautiful word which is Erkenntnis. And Erkenntnis does not exist in English, so we tried to connect with philosophers from Germany and as well native English-speaking persons, and they said there is no word for Erkenntnis. So probably the closest one would be knowledge gain, because as you mentioned, we are the process is still involved. And I would say therefore the epistemic quality is the closest formulation of that, because the presentation, the art should always show how I got to it. So the entanglement between message and medium, but as well the development, the action that did lead to that is very much into that term of Erkenntnis. But when you cut that off, and I think when we have the term Erkenntnis and the word knowledge, so there I would see the difference that knowledge is Erkenntnis, but without the process, how you came to that. And in the arts, I think we always have to show, and we want to show, and it's the belief that the way that leads to that final, probably rather a dense question or a situation that has a certain density and an epistemic quality, that is very essential, and we could not, therefore I could not make the step into knowledge. But it's, the problem probably is that the philosophy, the phenomenology is very much rooted in German language, and we have this beautiful term. Therefore, already the title, I was not very happy with the translation, knowledge, boundary of knowledge, because I cannot say that I see myself as a producer of knowledge, but rather as someone who tries to establish a situation where myself and other following perceivers have, let's say, a condensed situation where you can gain a recognition, or where you are confronted with your own act of perceiving and your own act of coming from perception to a meaning.
Okay.
Very quick. But if I understood, there is a phrase of Joseph Beuys that's a very precise phrase about this kind of phenomenon in art. When he said, thinking is form. Form is not always a way to explain things, to conclude things. In many ways, form can be only a way to live with, to live for, to look at. I think it's more than this meaning that you are trying to put for us.
Super, thank you. Regina?
Well, I think that knowledge has different significations in any language. German is rich, Latin language is rich, Hebrew is very rich, Arab is very rich. I go behind both of them. When we were in Japan, we learned some things that it was another way of looking things. So, of course, language is below everybody that we do. But graphic art, drawing, I will try to don't do too much synonymia. Drawing is something that comes from another way of talking. And when you say science you have to repeat the same experiment in Brazil or in England or in Japan to have a scientific confirmation, I will say, no, Of course not. This can be in some kind of sciences, but in others, you don't have to repeat, you have to see the diversity. You cannot have an object that or a goal or a system or a line up that is similar all around the globe. If you think on chronobiology, that is my subject, on chronopharmacology, that is my subject, it's completely different living in the equator, living in the poles, and living here. And we know that it's different. We will be primed by this place that we were born, and this will imply a lot of phenomenological things. Sounds like Darwinism. No, doesn't. It sounds like Lamarckism. And now we know that Lamarckism and Darwinism go together. And the ambience is important and the genes are important. So there is no more this division that we are together. That we had many years ago. Even if in the papers till now, you can see that Darwinism is science and Lamarckism is not, but the ambience interferes in the mice. Yes, we do this every day. So what I think here is that what draw shows and why it is knowledge, because even as a mark of the, it's different from a photograph. When I saw a photograph, I can see the moment as it was in the ambience. When I see a draw, I can see the moment as what's seen by a human being in that time, with that concept. And this will be, in the future, analyzed as knowledge. So we can go back and we can analyze all these pictures and all these images, but we have to know in what century it was done. So if you find a coin in a place, very nice draw coin, and you cannot know that this coin was coined 3,500 years ago, you mistake the information that you were having. So we put it on time, the form, and this is art. Art admits that in the future, our knowledge from the past will be harder. So because of this exposition was so important, and not just the name, the concept.
Britta?
So I just want to come back to Sandra's considerations about knowledge and what the relationship between art and knowledge. And I was thinking about, you also differentiate between, you mentioned that searching might be more important for you than researching, but it could come back to research, yeah? And I was thinking about what makes the difference. And research, I think, is a kind of systematic approach, and it's very output result oriented. And I mentioned already, I think the search is more kind of process. It has often also a physical. It's also often a physical experience. And it's a kind of reflective process to open up new spheres for knowledge production. And therefore I really like the quotation of Bruce Nauman. I just want to repeat it. It's about art could open up the possibility of thinking. It's not a systematic proof of thinking. And that brings me to Regina's remark, because you mentioned also that you could observe that there is science intends to focus on some approaches which might be fashionable in a way, for example Darwinism, and after a while you come back and realize, no, it's more a mixture of what Lamarck said and was Darwin said. But I think you need curiosity and open-minded researchers on the one hand side, but maybe also artists on the other side, to open up the space and not to channel your reception in a way. And I think this is also what we should discuss, your reflection about reception and seeing without prejudice, just to be really open to the process and not be so much influenced by schools of research or whatever, which are really important to make sure that there is a standard and quality criteria in research, and research should be universal and so on. But it always need to bring in the light, yeah? Cracks bring in the light, and that's what artists do.
Sandra or Ari? No? Microphone and mask.
Yes, I think, thank you, Britta, as well, and Regina for these remarks, and Claudio. I think I would say that it's a question of a closed or an open system. I would say a good piece of art in my eyes is an offer that has to be completed by perception, with the viewer and the perceiver comes and completes it. So it's rather an offer, and it's incomplete because it wants to be open, and it wants to be an invitation for experience. Probably there I could give a certain difference between why I am not so convinced with including arts into production of knowledge.
I would like to make another provocation. When you said about closed and open system, trying to think about science and art, is there maybe a connection with the situation that we are living now? For example, we have to deal with a very struggle problem during the pandemic. Scientists and science try to explain to people what kind of situation we have faced. And in my perspective, I don't say that the science have failed, but the communication of science was not so good. I think we have a lot of discredit about orientation that was in part made by the difficulty we had to explain to regular people what are science, what was the way, the epistemic quality that science have. I guess, is there maybe a difficulty because in a very traditional way, science was habituated to think as a closed system, which means that normally we have this idea that science can make knowledge without connection with the epistemic process that was behind the knowledge. And this is difficult to communicate it. It means that in a sense, when we just offer the knowledge, it means the final process of the science is like an act of faith that we are asking people to agree to accept it. And in this sense, the artistic perspective that always connecting the process and the product, the epistemic quality and the final process of arts may be more adapted with the changeable time that we are living for. For example, we have to put the masks back, and maybe for the most part of the people that think that the pandemic was in the past, but it was not in the past, they coming back. It means that we are always in process. It means that the image of final knowledge is no longer adapted to the moment, to the present time. I don't know if you understand the difference big, and I invited you to jump in this kind of provocation.
Oh, Ali?
Não, não.
Ari, vai, você tem preferência. Okay, then I tell.
So,
Okay. I don't see science like this. I think that we are reducing, and to reduce things to one case is always problematic. Science, you have something that is science, that when you look for boundaries, for new boundaries, so this is some kind of science. Then when you have something that you have a knowledge that was created from that adventure, and this knowledge is just knowledge, and it's good knowledge, and this I think the artists come together with the story that we are coming to something new, but now can be translated. So knowledge is this translation of the process. Then you come to another part that we use it to say that is the Vale da Morte. Ari, por favor. Valley of Death. This, okay. So as when you have to pass this to something practical, and that people can profit, doesn't matter is it economic profit or is not economic profit, that people can use it. And so we cannot put everything in the same pot. Of course, these times that we just passed, it's not science. What we saw is that science has many answers. And we had to come out with these answers with time. At the beginning, many things were wrong, but they were not so wrong because we passed on it. And so then came the stories of how to deal with this kind of virus, how to deal with the problem. And one thing that is clear, for me that are in the field, for me that publish something about defense, and not immunity, defense. There is one thing that we will need to come out with the story of defense, is that if we have this kind of problem in many centuries ago, and that, this century is the century of breathing. It's the century that we will not have just one, but we will have several, and we'll have to know how to deal with it, and humanity is learning to do it. And you have to put this once more, okay, let's do it, with no problem. Nobody feels bad in being with masquerade people here. I see all the eyes, and I will recognize the eyes. This is important, how the eyes shine. And so, but science, if I go seriously, I will say that science looks for new boundaries with a scientific method that was determined many years ago, but with many others. Scientific methods. And if I look in biology nowadays is more as a teia, Ari, por favor? Teia de aranha. Network, okay, I didn't want to use the word network, want to use the word for the spider. It's not a network of spiders, it's the tail of the spiders that they do, is a network. Yeah, okay, thank you. So this network, you can see that each spider, each one has its own design, has its own draw. There is no network of spiders, one that is equal to the other. They can be similar, but they are not the same. They are like printings, okay? So this, I think, is coming to be science now. The rules are beginning to be much more difficult to do with it because they are a little bit not so easy. When I say that I go to B and B go to C, this was easier. Now it's more complex. And this is the complexity of drawing. Because now drawing is coming on our stories. And we have now in the groups, and I saw yesterday, I came out from the Brazilian Society of Pharmacology and Therapeutics, that I was former president, but now it came out a booklet that was made by one scientist and one person from drawing, a student that just draw in the art school, because they have to translate the idea drawing. So this, I think, is the game here. The game is how I can sit without understanding, and this will bring knowledge after it.
Claudio. And the public is invited to make questions also or make comments just after Claudio.
It's very simple, the idea. I think perhaps the problem is not only in the method, but in the actions too. In the times of Google Maps, everybody wants a map all the time. But I think that we have artists and scientists that prefers walk without a map, to live in the root. And there are scientists and artists that need the map. Perhaps the action is the problem, not the system.
Ô, Martin, você tá com o microfone, quiser perguntar?
Tá vendo? What I think is interesting is that I agree totally with Britta when she said about the ambience. So the Institute for Advanced Studies ambience is the place where we need first to hear and to absorb what we are hearing, you know, from the other. And it's a place where you definitely will be in touch with someone that is quite different from you and quite different from the way that you have been taught how to understand things. No? So, but I think it's interesting in that environment in this ambience. The other day I was talking to Marcos Bukerich, and he's someone that really is very enthusiastic about bringing together different minds and different intellectuals and scientists, artists, and he's also very curious about to hear what the other is saying. No? But he came with this idea that for him there was no doubt that science has a reference in progress. And that struck me in a way, because I think the 20th century for all of us, but the meaning or the art as produced up to the 20th century really had a sort of a revolution, because for many reasons it really started to think in a way that is not necessarily attached to progress, even though art historians tend to think that there was like a sequence of isms, no? Impressionism, expressionism, and so forth. No? But when we see Sandra Boeschenstein's exhibition, or an artist, or being she or he, that strikes you, and I think this is something that it affects the body and affects the mind. Is that something that, in a way, brings you into a suspension? Is a way of stopping time and allow you to relate to not only to the form, and I think Beuys is very interesting when you think about thinking as form, no? But also about the processing of the mind and the processing of producing knowledge. So, and this might be remarked because I want to understand from you what you think, since we are discussing this coming together of art and science. If indeed there is this separation, if it's the guideline, one of the main guidelines for science is progress. And how this relates to your understanding also from the arts, no? But my last remark is about Bruno Latour, and it's interesting because Bruno Latour is a thinker that even for our knowledge or our teaching, no, he was always a bit apart, but he was very, very much interested in analyzing the way science work. So he was like an ethnographer of science. And I think this is one of the qualities maybe of art that we really try to suspend time and to think about processing, how we produce, how knowledge is being produced in space-time. No? So there is a sort of, but I don't want to contrast, and I think Regina is being very good on that, on bringing to attention that we are not necessarily contrasting art and science. We are trying to bring together these different understandings and experiences we have in relation to that. No? So now, back to you.
Você gostaria de comentar? Opa, por favor. Regina.
We are here to discuss, no? So, stopping time. This is my life. Indeed, my great contribution in science was showing how our body stops receiving information about outside time when it has a problem. And we need to stop time. When we have to defend ourselves against a bacteria, against a virus, we have to do something that our body will not deal with day or night, but will answer for some days, in at least 3 days, very hard to combat what is coming. Indeed, you can have, we showed situations that this will be driven by internal forces, and that will become to have some kind of diseases. But also, there are situations, and now it's not only my work, but it's my work with some colleagues outside, that we are seeing that there are a very good, and it's very good if we can stop timing in our biological functions in order to begin again. And you can call it as you wish, okay? So studying, and people that study in a regular way have this opportunity. You can call it meditation. We can call it a conversation. And we measure all the cytokines and everything that doesn't mention here. So heart, you're right. If I go to some place that I can, it's not something that I can touch, it's not something that I can use, it's not something that I can do. I just stay there. And I am delighted with what I see, with what I heard, or also in the theater. I am delighted with the story. There is everything there, you have everything together. So this biologically for me sounds. And this is science too. So we have here, because of this I don't have to have an opposition in between science and art, because art is something that we can translate biologically in cytokines, in melatonin, in glucocorticoids and everything like this. And there are people that are measuring this. So this is not canonic, okay? But if you go back and go to canon, because canonic comes from canon much more than from the church, so canon, that was the first one that described inflammation and described the adrenal gland and all of this. If you go back to canon, you can see that many things that he spoke in the end of the 18th century and the 19th century and beginning of the 20s are now being restudied, because now we have a lot of elements, primary elements to study it. It's art. I think, yes, art is the same story. Martin taught me many times that we came from a figurative art to an abstract art to something that, and it comes and goes, and it comes and goes. So I think that art and science talk. And this is the point. So I think you were right. And art is progress or science is progress. I don't want to analyze progress. You know my opinion. I think that progress is something very difficult to progress, to perceive it. So let's progress be discussed in another place.
So I just want to come back to what Mauricio mentioned or questioned. I think science is the best way for us to deal with the challenges we are experiencing. So I really want to say we should appreciate science as a way of a systematic study of complexity of the world. And maybe this is the best way to survive. So the problems during the pandemics, I would totally agree with Regina, was that science has to give up its complexity because the political sphere were pressing the scientists, what shall we do? But this is not, that science was, is not a very powerful method to understand and to deal with the challenges. And I think art is really totally different, so we shouldn't compare. There is, I think, no hierarchy in that, but both interrelates is that both are very much interested in dealing with complexity and being aware that the approaches and knowledge of the world is incomplete and will always be. And I think this both separates it from different forms, other forms of creating knowledge, religion ways of creating knowledge or cultural ways or so. I think this makes both spheres very, very important and strong. But they are working in very different spheres and they shouldn't be put together too tightly.
Yes, I would make some comments on the term of progress. On your and yours statement, because I think this is rather, this probably we have a different access to progress. And it was very interesting that during the pandemic I was in another Center for Advanced Study at Hanse Wissenschaftskolleg, and we were somehow from people all over the world. I was the only artist and many scientists locked in a campus. We couldn't leave, so we decided to organize evening that someone would present something which would not completely be attached to the field, to the others, just to have a good time, to spend a good time together. And I observed that the term of Anthropocene was the most used term in all the discussions and lectures, and then I thought, let's as well focus on the term of progress, because I think progress as a word and as a term is very fine, and it fits in many cases. It fits very well when you have a linearity or you have to solve a problem or so. But there is always the question that is a bit forgotten: progress for whom? Because progress is a linear movement. And it's clear that it's progress for human being to me. So that was one comment I made, but I wanted to show them that the progress used as an ideology, which is in our days, I'm convinced that it is used. I wanted to show them prehistoric art and combine it with the claim that in arts progress does not exist. Because progress is always something that says the quality of that what has been there is overcome by the next step, and that is not the case. I'm really an enthusiast of prehistoric drawings, and the fact is that I can stand in front of those drawings of an age of 30 or more thousand years, and I communicate with them in a direct way. I do not see them as a testimony, but they are masterpieces. And I think the quality, when I showed them, they asked me, of course, then what do we have when it's not about progress? And my answer was its intensity and the ability of a deep communication. So I would say within arts we we have no progress, because you can stand in front of a piece that has many thousand years, created many thousand years ago, or a piece of our days, and it can happen that it has a certain intensity, and since intensity is always the intensity that you create in the communication of the viewer and the art piece. So I would say intensity, and this is very much bound as well to situation awareness again, that you have to be able to connect with the situation, and in arts, when you are lucky, it's a situation or a vis-a-vis that is very dense and gives you the opportunity to go through a very intense experience.
Just one phrase, you said art and progress, this is not the case. We can say art and progress, this is not the cave.
I would like to make some comments about the idea of progress. When Martin said about the connection between science and progress, I think I am a science educator. I think the most the public image of science that we normally pass when we teach science to children and to youth, it's this connection between science and progress. And I think my comment before, it was, I think we have a lot of things to learn from arts. The incompleteness of the systems, the perspective that we are in arts conscient, aware that we never finish nothing. We have always a partial perspective. Is this a kind of, normally in the public face of science, normally we didn't want to show to people that, in fact, in science is this the same. Even when we think that we have know something, there are some new faces or new problems that put our back to review, to see again. And I think this is a kind of an exercise that you have to do more to try to educate people to understand the values of science. This is, I think that we have a lot to learn with the artist's perspective. I think this is a very useful thing to put art and science more close in the educational process. For that reason that I think the idea of progress is really a dangerous that we put the science and progress very close, because it's not really the fact. I think I completely agree with you, Sandra, that the progress is a more linear perspective for the achievements, and I think it's not the best way to understand the power of scientific knowledge for humankind.
We have
10 minutes yet. Please. I try to push some. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Sandra. Hi, everybody. Well, I'll try in English. We are saying. Okay. My name is Brisa. I'm Martin Desorientanda, as we talked before. And I'm finishing my master's, and my main topic is this approximation between arts and science, I would say. And so we are talking here today, and most of the time we are bringing together or trying to bring close the artistic field and the scientific field. But I remember when you said something, and even here today you mentioned that you believe that art and science should meet in the center, and then each one should go and find your own path again. So I think we brought really close these two fields here, like through this conversation. But I would like to hear you talking more about how you go back after you meet in the center, like as an artist. And how do you think that the scientists could go back to? And how do you think, or how do you imagine, if you imagine, I don't know if it's something that you are concerned, how you imagine that the scientists should go back, or how this conversation or this new relation that is being constructed could happen. But I understand that we should not mix them. They're not the same. It's okay. And so I would like to hear more about how do you think about all these topics as an artist, like, because in the end you are an artist, right? So.
Thank you, Brisa, for this question. I would even say we should not meet in the center, but when we are together, when we share some months on a campus, I would even say we should show each other in the most radical way that the other person sees clearly what the difference is, but to do this with a very friendly stage and inviting. I can talk a bit about the experiences. I had the experience then when you have the opportunity to share time, and it's the best way to share time and to observe each other. So it starts in a very informal way, that we realize probably I should knock at that door because I do not understand how she can work for 12 hours a day. And then it starts like that. And the very important discussions I had came out of such an informal, non-organized coming together because of a need, because of a wish of an exchange. I have no specific wish what I want to change within the scientists or in the view, but I think I witnessed many great exchanges, and I think it's very nice to talk about the practice, to talk about how and to compare and to exchange methods, how you organize your working place. How do you find the right size of a question? What kind of decisions do you make that you are able to start with your work and that you can deal with that pendulum movement between clear decisions that allow you that only clear decisions allow you to see what happens on the other side. And when I was talking and exchanges my experience with scientists, we saw that we are somehow in many times very close together, but we can learn from each other by being forced to communicate and to explain it to someone who is from another field. We somehow have we need this surplus of energy of a vis-a-vis to explain and to listen to ourselves and to sharpen our position. I think these are the best experiences that I had. So. You're welcome.
Okay, I think we can make the final comments, the final words, and I invited maybe Claudio. You start the final words.
It's more difficult than the first words in the beginning. Well, I think this opportunity showed to me and to us that we need to make these approximations more and more, because the sense of university are losing space. We live in a campus that have a direction to create new doctors, new scientists, new artists, but the interaction between all this kind of knowledge, or this no knowledge forms of understand the phenomenon, the word, and all the things that we have are huge. And we think the best way to make this grow together is this kind of situation, where people relate your particular experiences and show your work and try to create bridges. Thank you.
Britta? I save you.
Thank you, Claudio, for this conclusion. I would totally agree, and I was thinking universal reality is really very important, but also curiosity. And curiosity is to open up your mind, yeah? To open up the world. And what we are experiencing right now is that there is a closing process. So the people capture themselves in bubbles, and they're not curious anymore what the world brings and how rich the world is. And I think both art and science could foster this curiosity, and this, I think, is a very important aspect as well.
Regina?
Well, I think that Instituto de Estudos Avançados and the University of São Paulo has space for it, but they are not used. I think Claudio was perfect when he said we need to have more encounters, but how? I will go a little bit further. How? Of course, as PPC, you were here. Maria Antonia is being for many years. We had many things here happening. And many people come from arts and for science to be together here. But you have any other place, but there is something missing. It's not easy to go and talk. So what I think in our university, because then I am in my university now, and what we need, and perhaps in others, is to have spaces where we can freely discuss and freely talk about it. And we have a space where we can express formally. Is the Instituto de Estudos Avançados okay? It's very easy to go there and to put a meeting and things like this. But what Claudio says is something more, is to be free to go to some place that I will meet you. I will see you in my university, and I said, oh, I like that guy. I want to talk with him a little bit more. He is an artist, he draws. And where can I do it? So now we come from the time of curiosity, okay? But for the curiosity to be feed, we need space. So at the beginning, I spoke about space, time, and knowledge. And now, to put the knowledge of art, or in the broad sense of the word knowledge, and to put both of them working at the same time, or you need a time and a place that we can meet. And this, I think, is the next step, so we can go over what is happening now, that is really each one in its niche. A niche is a word that in biology is very important. I would like that my cells stays in their niche. I don't want that they migrate like this as they wish. This is not good. But I want that when they migrate, they take good notice and they can speak with other cells without bothering them. And I know that you understood what is the comparison. So yes, Claudio, I think you gave the last word for many of us, and we need more contact. We need more places to discuss. I will not like to do it in a university closed during another pandemic. Excuse me, I would like to do it here and in other places like this. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, Claudio.
I think we can propose space, time, and grace.
Professor Ali? Pode ser?
Well, first it was delicious to be here. This house, you know the house better than I do. But
Ali, pouquinho mais perto.
Sorry, this house in was kind of the beginning of University of São Paulo. As University of São Paulo is, we have schools that were existed previously. But as university, it was created in 1934, and this was innovation at the time. It was a school, faculdade, the philosophy, science, and letters, with the idea that everything is kind of a part of a concept. And then, obviously, for different reasons, it became fragmented. So I think that what we are talking about at the end of the day is that we are talking about different human endeavors. Both art, science, and other things are human endeavors that for different reasons that have many things in common: curiosity, creativity, innovation, new things happening, both in art and in science, etc., etc., etc. But for reasons that we didn't have time here to analyze, we also came to a situation of fragmentation. So you have fragmentation in science, fragmentation in arts, and you have interplay of interests. But you have, I think, last year or so, were 60 years of the famous book of C.P. Snow, Two Cultures, the culture of humanities and the culture of hard sciences. So I think that the movement is a movement of, at some point, fragmentation, specialization, whatever, and at some point of trying to see what we are losing by excessive fragmentation, and how we can, respecting these different capabilities, how we can benefit, how we can personally benefit by growing, having a richer life, but also collectively, if you have these spaces of contact. University of São Paulo has a very interesting way of showing it. At the center of the main campus, there is a kind of a clock, a tower with a clock, and around it, it's a kind of a lake, or not beautiful as in Switzerland, but some very little amount of water with something. And around this, it's written that in the universe of culture, the center is everywhere. So I think the first thing is respect. There's nothing, sometimes people tend to be arrogant, scientists tend to be arrogant, professors are very arrogant, it's part of our, the artists may be arrogant. So the first thing is, that I think is what happened here, is an evidence that if we are able to hear, to see, to feel what other people do, how other endeavors are, we'll become richer, and we'll share, and collectively we'll be richer too. I think this is I would say what I basically felt from this encounter. Now, obviously you can have different interests. You can have the interest that I presented in the case of Birmingham. So how can I be a better scientist by having an artist with me, or how can I be a better artist knowing or using science? You have different ways of different interests, but I would say that, to finalize, that here we had not only Globish, but we had also Hebrew and German words that are very specific. The idea of mazal, which is, it's not luck, it's different, because we usually translate mazal, it's luck. Like if you go to buy a lottery ticket, and I can win or not win. If I won, it's luck. But mazal, what what Regina tells us, it is this combination of understanding the situation, being in the right moment, and having the knowledge of recognizing the situation, the moment, the time, and knowing what to do in that specific point, which came with the idea of pandemics. This is a whole other discussion. But and then I think to take the words which were not in English, and if you take, if I understand what Sandra said, erkenntnis is a word that has many meanings. It can be knowledge, but it can be insight, and insight is something that's also common in art and in science. And erkenntnis is also something, if I understand, related to recognize something. So what I think we are doing here, and thank you, Martin, again for promoting this idea of giving recognition to the other human endeavor, giving praise, admiration, trying to understand, knowing that it's different, respecting. So I think that's what we're trying to do modestly, but thank you so much for organizing this. Sandra, you have the last word.
Thank you. So I totally agree that we should go on and create new situation of such an exchange. What could I add? Then a proposition or a suggestion for a new huge question that should be discussed among scientists and artists. And this is the strategy of reduction of complexity, which when I observe science, sometimes struggle a lot with. This topic of reduction of complexity could be a very interesting one for a next encounter.
Okay, I thank you all for the participation. I'm very proud, very good to be here, and try to learn each other about the different aspects. And thank again Martin to organize this. And I welcome all the audience that was here and share your opinion and attention with us.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
And please, Britta, who is a good manager, said, don't forget to tell people to see the exhibit or see the exhibit again. So.
Yes, okay. It's until Sunday, till Sunday, no? Till the Sunday to be here. Okay.
So, thank you so much. E agradecer o Sérgio, a Larissa, né, pelo apoio. E thank you so much for accepting the invitation.